All right, welcome to the Jim Acosta Show, and it's another day that ends in Y and Donald Trump's assault on democracy in America. Trump and his aides are in the process of invading more Democratic cities with ICE officers and National Guard members from other states. The latest flashpoints, of course, are Chicago and Portland, Oregon. Meanwhile, the government is still shut down here in Washington. We're waiting to see if there's any end in sight to that. Both sides are still going at one another. And obviously, as we have stated on this program time and again, this is a MAGA shutdown. Republicans control the White House, they control the House, they control the Senate. And so we're going to just state things as they are instead of both siding this crisis as others do. But my big guest this hour is David Hogg. We all know David Hogg. He's a bit of a rabble rouser, you might say, among progressive Democrats. And David has a relatively brand new group that he started. He's the co-founder of a new group of young progressives called Leaders We Deserve. David, good to see you. Thanks for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Jim.
And, you know, one of the questions that I've had, David, is whether Democrats are going for enough here. You know, they've been talking about Obamacare subsidies, that sort of a thing, which is important. That there's no question about it. We can't, you know, you don't want healthcare costs going up for people who are on Obamacare. But I mean, with Trump invading cities, ICE going wild, it seems to me the Democrats could be asking for a whole lot more in this process. Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there certainly is more that they could be asking for, but at minimum, it's important that they know that our red line is that we are not going to allow the subsidies for the Affordable Care Act that help cover about 75% of people's premiums to lapse. That is our line in the sand, because it is unacceptable to us that, you know, as Donald Trump spends hundreds of billions of dollars more on growing the police state while claiming to be against a tyrannical government, they are simultaneously trying to cut healthcare for 22 million Americans, and not just those Americans that rely on the Affordable Care Act. The healthcare, it's important to remember that the private healthcare system is an ecosystem. Just because you aren't on Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act doesn't mean that your premiums aren't going to rise as well if these subsidies are cut. And we need people to know that that's our line in the sand at minimum, that there is no deal to be made if the cost of it is 22 million people and their health care.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thought process is that as, you know, healthcare costs rise for everybody, if you're in Obamacare, if you're not in Obamacare, if those premiums go up for people who are on Obamacare, that is going to get, you know, there's going to be a ripple effect. We're all going to have to pick up the cost of that. Let's just jump right into what you've been up to, David, because you've got this group, Leaders We Deserve. And I guess inside the Democratic Party, they've been bracing themselves for this. But you've endorsed 4 rising progressive leaders: Michigan State Representative Donovan McKinney for Congress in Michigan's 13th District, Harris County Attorney Christian Menefee for Congress in Texas's 18th District, Randy Villegas for Congress in California's 22nd District. And you're also endorsing a candidate for the Georgia State House in District 106 in Georgia. And what's interesting about all of these candidates, David, is that they're much younger than me. I guess the average age is maybe
for Congress, Jim.
they're around. They are eligible for Congress, but they're in their early to mid 30s. Why do these endorsements? Why take this step?
So we decided today to make our latest round of endorsements as a slate, which is pretty unusual for our organization. We typically do one at a time. And we did this as a slate because we want people to know the types of races we're involved in. Some of the races that we're going to be involved in this cycle, we're going to be challenging the Democratic incumbent, such as Sri Tanadar, who Donovan McKinney is challenging in a safe blue seat that is almost certainly going to remain Democratic. And some of them, they're going to be in red to blue seats like Randy Villegas is, which is a seat critical for Democrats to win in order to take back the House. So that we can start to hold Donald Trump accountable and put up a much bigger fight than strongly worded letters against what they're doing. And it represents, too, some of the work we do in state legislatures, where Akbar Ali would be the youngest person elected ever to the Georgia State Legislature at the age of 21, after our most recent endorsee, Bryce Berry in Georgia, became the youngest ever at the age of 23 for the state legislature there. And then we also have, obviously, Christian Menefee's race. And in that district, what's really interesting about that is the 2 previous members who served that district, both of them died in Congress, one after the other, to the point that the people in that district arguably really haven't had any representation for just about 2 years now because their members have literally been perpetually dying. And Christian has a great track record of holding the Trump administration accountable in court and winning, taking on polluters. There's a lot of oil refineries in Houston, obviously, that are notorious for poisoning communities because of the air pollution and other toxins that get into the environment. And he's worked to hold them accountable. And these are the type of candidates that we're looking to support. People who, for example, when they say they aren't going to take corporate money, continue to not take corporate money. Sri Thanedar then went and took corporate money after saying that he wouldn't. That is not the type of person that we believe belongs in Congress. And what we're trying to do with the work here at Leaders We Deserve, it's not to say that Congress is supposed to be full of just 25-year-olds. That would be a disaster. But it's to say maybe we need a new generation to come in and help to light a fire under Democrats to make sure that we aren't just justifying our governance based off of the amount of harm that we aren't doing, but based off the amount of good that we're doing and how we're working to ensure that people have faith in government, not because of how bad Republicans are at running it, but because of how good we are at making it actually work.
Yeah, I mean, and there's something to be said for having young blood coming into the party. I mean, Maxwell Frost has been a very effective member of Congress, very effective spokesman for young progressives. I mean, AOC is kind of the latest blueprint, I suppose, or prototype for this type of member of Congress. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people, and I've noticed this on my show, is that one of the prevailing comments that we see from time to time is that there are people frustrated with the leadership in the Democratic Party, and they see a lot of members who have been around for a long, long time. They get comfortable in these seats. They don't take a lot of chances. And so you end up with sort of status quo, on steroids. And I guess, how do you make these selections? How did you pick and choose these? Did you say, okay, this guy over here is not doing a whole lot. What about that district? How does that work?
I mean, the way it works is when we look, obviously, our top priority is making sure that we're supporting candidates who are good at their jobs, not just because they're young necessarily. Sometimes in some districts, it may be an older person who's better there. What we look for is somebody like a Maxwell Frost. He's actually who our organization was modeled after because I hired him when he was at March for Our Lives, when he started working at March for Our Lives when I was a freshman in college. And then he told me he wanted to run for Congress when I was in my junior year. And I said to him, I was like, you're 24, right? You have to be 25 to be elected to Congress. And he said, yes, I'll be old enough by the time I'm elected. And in Maxwell's case, the reason why he was the right person for that district wasn't simply because he was 25 years old. It's because he had a decade of experience working in the gun violence prevention movement since he was 15 years old, doing advocacy, even with some of the survivors from Sandy Hook. To challenge the NRA, to challenge our elected officials to pass stronger gun laws. And then he went on to work at the ACLU, holding Biden accountable on the Hyde Amendment. And he had a proven track record. And his opponents just frankly were not good. One of them rarely showed up in the state legislature when he was serving there and had one of the worst attendance records of anybody. Then on top of that, he was running against two former members of Congress, both of whom were Democrats. One had committed tax fraud while in Congress, and the other was a hedge fund manager while they were in Congress. And when that is the bar to entry, I think it was pretty clear in Maxwell's case that he was the right person to support there. And that's kind of the approach that we take with these candidates. Sometimes it's not always necessarily going to be the youngest person in a district, but we obviously want a younger person. It's going to be the most qualified young person in that district who can really make a meaningful difference. In the case of Christian Menifee, for example, he's done a lot of great work to hold the administration accountable and special interests accountable. And what we're trying to do at Leaders We Deserve is, I like to say that we're like lumbar support for people with a spine. We try to find the people that take on the hard fights in state legislatures, in their districts, in other offices, or have done advocacy before that prove that they have real values that they're willing to stick by, and do everything that we can to get them elected and get them across the finish line. Because I think one of the greatest threats to our democracy isn't just Donald Trump. I think it's the hopelessness, the idea that so many young people have that everything is screwed and it doesn't matter what you do. In part because they don't see themselves in power, but because they don't see how government is effectively working for them, because they don't have communicators out there, or not nearly enough of them, that are able to successfully use social media to say, actually, this is how we're using government to stand up to special interests. And I don't think that we're going to be able to change the campaign finance system that holds all of these special interests together, that has broken so much of our politics, if we don't start to elect some people with real financial support like we provide them, so that they can have a backbone.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think that, I mean, I talk about this on my show, that, for all the talk of Trump derangement syndrome, I worry about Trump depression syndrome.
Right.
And I talk about this, and I mean, when talking to a lot of boomers, I'll be really honest with you, and people who are Gen Xers like myself, because they're folks who've been around a long time, and they're like, holy shit, how did we end up with a society where Trump's been elected for the second time, and it's just becoming this dystopian nightmare? But you're right. There are a lot of young people who have just given up too. And I think that's part of what happened in 2024, is that it was what Charlemagne the God said. They lost to the couch. The couch won in many ways. And I guess it leads me to this question, David, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. Your thoughts on how the Democrats are being led right now. Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, how they doing?
Poorly. I think part of it is because they've become victims of Steve Bannon's approach, which is just to flood the zone and exhaust people. And when you're playing so much defense, it's hard to go on the offense, obviously. But we have to see more of a fight out there. I mean, there are people like Kat, who I know you interviewed last week, who are literally, and people like Bushra in her race as well, who are under the age of 30. And I'm seeing more of a fight from them against the terrorization of American communities by ICE in places like Chicago than I'm seeing from 99% of the members of Congress that are out there. That is insane, because they are, if anything, they should be the ones that are least likely to go out there. They have the most to lose. They have their entire life ahead of them. But instead, what we're seeing is the opposite. The people with the most power seem to be doing the least right now to actually fight back. And we need more than strongly worded letters. We need them to go out there and say, all right, if we take back the House, this is what our subpoenas are going to look like, for example. To bring people in front of Congress and say, all right, we're going to bring in the head of ICE, we're going to bring in all these other people and grill them and hold them accountable. And I think that there's more that we need to do to see them in the streets with us protesting as well, and not just, on the inside of government saying, well, here's our strongly worded letter to this guy that clearly does not care at this point, and be using every tool at our disposal to fight back against them, including our governors and our attorney generals in blue states around the country.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a situation. I mean, Trump does not take Schumer and Jeffries very seriously. He just doesn't. I mean, I think Nancy Pelosi used to drive him absolutely crazy, which I think was an attribute of hers. You saw Trump in the Oval Office with Jeffries and Schumer the other day, and he's showing them Trump 2028 hats. And I guess just over the weekend, he was speaking to people in the Navy who were gathered, I believe, down in Norfolk, and he just talked about Democrats as if they were a gnat. I think we have that video. If we have it, we can play it. If not, we can just react to it. But if we have that video, let's play it.
But we have to take care of this little gnat that's on our shoulder called the Democrats. They want to give all of our money to illegal aliens that pour into the country. And, I have a bigger heart than they do. But the problem is when you do that, they come in by the millions. Everybody wants that, so you can't do it.
Yeah, I mean, just obviously full of shit there. We pointed this out many times, that's not what Democrats want. And, if you are undocumented in this country, you can't get on Medicaid and all these other. Anyway, we fact checked that a million times. But I mean, the thing that to me was pertinent there is he regards the Democratic Party as a gnat.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's disgusting, obviously. Yeah. And then we have people like, Pete Hegseth going out there and saying that diversity is our, effectively our weakness, which is, not only just historically and factually inaccurate, it is incredibly stupid, where they are trying to turn our country against itself, where I believe our differences actually are what makes us a strong country. There's a reason why when our country was being founded, some of the founding fathers were coming together, like Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and others, and working on what should our national motto be for our great seal. The one that they landed on was E pluribus unum, out of many, one. I don't think what they were thinking is that diversity is our weakness when they did that, right? And I think that Trump's constant dehumanization of Democrats and his political enemies, I mean, the attempts to politicize the military is really what concerns me there, right? Where he is giving this speech that is extremely political in front of all of these, sailors, and effectively saying that we're going to, as he has said in the past, that we're going to deploy the military to our cities, that the enemy is within, and all these other things. And I think that, frankly, the people that are made happiest by this aren't necessarily Republicans. I think it's our enemies, because they know that the only way to defeat America is to turn it on itself. I think that in face of great dangers from, the outside of our country, from our adversaries, we are incredibly strong. But the only way that we can be defeated is if we turn on each other and have our greatest strength, which is our diversity, weaponized against us, and have our country brainwashed into thinking that that somehow is a weakness. When last I checked, I don't think that Pete Hegseth could be a Navajo code talker in World War II, right? I don't think that we would have likely won the American Revolution without the incredibly critical role that female spies played for Washington and other military leaders throughout that war. And to act like that is our weakness is just incredibly stupid.
Well, and it's insane because he should not be the defense secretary. He's not qualified to be the defense secretary. He's
not qualified to drive a school bus.
I certainly wouldn't want him driving a school bus with my kids in them, given his track record. But no, there's no question about it. So, David, let me ask you then the question that I guess folks in the establishment side of the Democratic Party would ask, which is, aren't you just sowing division in the party, and is that helpful? What do you say when you hear that?
Look, I think that we have to hammer out our differences through our primaries and then consolidate around the Democratic nominee, whether that's on the left side of our party, like Zoran, of whom we were one of the largest financial supporters. We gave him $300,000 to support that campaign. And on top of that, so I'd say on the left side, we have to consolidate around that. And then if there's a more conservative Democrat, even if I don't necessarily fully agree with them, we have to make sure that we're able to gain power to preserve our democracy at the end of the day. And that's really the main red line that I think that we need to have. And what I would say is that if this isn't the answer to try to turn things around, if you want to just constantly focus on our messaging over and over and over again, like we've tried to say since before I was born in the year 2000, you can go ahead and do that. I just don't think
had a heart attack. Anyway, sorry, David, keep going.
No, I just don't think that we're going to find a way out of this unless we really hammer this out through our primaries in our safe seats. And let me be extremely clear about what we're doing here with Leaders We Deserve when we do challenge a Democratic member. It is not going to be somebody that is in a purple seat simply because I or this organization doesn't necessarily agree with them. Look, there's plenty of Democrats that I think need to be better on guns, but are in purple seats that we're not going to be challenging because we need those seats in order to gain back the House. What we're focused on is getting the most effective Democrats elected in seats like Michigan, the one that we're working in with Donovan McKinney, to challenge people like Sri Thanadar because he's got such bad constituent services alone that he is having other Democratic members of Congress in neighboring districts like Rashida Tlaib tweet at him, asking him to get better at his constituent services because so many people are asking them for help. And on top of that, he's also spent nearly $1 million in taxpayer dollars on self-promoting ads in the district. That's crazy. And if the establishment wants to go out there and defend him and say, like, that's something that we absolutely need more of in Congress, be my guest. But I think you just proved why you shouldn't be part of our establishment anymore if you think that's the case.
And speaking of Mamdani, why do you think there are so many establishment Democrats who didn't rally around him? I mean, I'm looking at what's taking place in New York, and yes, I'm not on the ground there every day. I don't live there anymore. Love the city, but I'm not there anymore. But you have establishment Democratic politicians not getting behind him when he won the goddamn primary. And he's telegenic. He's personable. I see him on TV. He's whip smart. He sounds like the kind of person the Democratic Party needs right now. And it's New York. Of course, it's more progressive. What did you make of some of these establishment figures not getting behind Mamdani?
Well, it reminded me of a lot of the conversations I had when I was in the DNC, where it feels a bit like in this party, we have all these people that say that we want to win back young people, but they don't want to talk about the number one issue that was being protested about on college campuses in the lead up to the 2024 election, which was Israel-Gaza, right? They don't want to talk about that. They say that they want to win back young people, but they want to tell them when those young people tell us that the president's too old, we say to them, no, he's not. Look at him. He's super strong. He's got everything together. And then we tell them, actually, he is. Vote for Kamala Harris. Then when they tell us that prices are too high, we say, no, it's not. Look at the stock market. Be happy about that when they're seeing their rents skyrocket and it's incredibly hard for them to get a job. If you tell people not to leave their eyeballs or wallets, no matter their age, you're going to lose them, no matter how much you spend on ads telling them otherwise and hoping that you can just gaslight the country into materially different conditions than they're facing.
I got news for everybody. Trump's not the only one who's full of shit around here.
Right.
I mean, that's just, that's how it is.
And it's not to say like, oh yeah, like both sides are the same, because that's not true. But it's to say,
I agree. Yeah.
we need to actually deal with the realities that voters are telling us they're facing. Because in politics, it's not a matter of what you've gotten done, unfortunately. It's a matter of what people think you've gotten done, right?
Yeah.
And even if you're telling them, I've got this done, I've got this done, I've got this done, but all they're hearing is you need to shut up and be happy because you shouldn't listen to how you're actually feeling about whatever reality you think you were living in right now, because your rent going up that high isn't that bad because the stock market's doing great, you're going to lose them. And I think in his case, it really highlights a pretty major fracture in the party where we want to get back into the majority, but we want to basically keep everything the same, to keep the same politicians and incumbents in power. And those two things are at total odds with each other. But if we can't take a clear note from a guy who got 3 times the 18 to 24-year-old turnout of young people compared to Kamala Harris, I don't know how seriously we can say we actually want to win back young people.
Yeah. And David, why do you not get frustrated? I mean, maybe you do get frustrated. Why did you went into the Democratic Party leadership, you stirred up some stuff, they got mad at you, you decided not to run again, you left the leadership and all of that. We don't have to go through the whole thing. But why did you decide to stay in this fight?
Because ultimately, I'm thinking about who's out. I know that I know the cost of not staying in that fight. My classmates from Parkland know that cost. And it's the same mentality of people who said, you know, I'm going to focus on X, Y, and Z issue, but I'm not going to talk about guns because the NRA is too powerful right now. And it's the same thing that's said about all these special interests. Where it's like, well, I can focus on this thing, but not these other things. And then people lose their lives because of that, or they lose their healthcare because of that, or they just have their lives fundamentally, you know, severely harmed because of the special interests that are destroying so much of our political system right now. And I have to believe, even if I have to believe that ultimately we're going to win, no matter, even if we fail a couple of times, because my generation has the greatest asset that we can have on our side in politics, which is much more important than just money, which we do need. Please support us at leaderswedeserve.com. But it's time. And the fact that I'm going to outlive a lot of the people who I am against, at least right now. The question is, what kind of country are we going to build in their place? What kind of party are we going to build in their place? Because I don't think it's one that any single one of us has the answer to build. But I do believe as a generation, if history has taught us anything, it's that great generations are not born. They're forged in the fires of awful circumstances. And our circumstances have been a bit unique for sure, but they've nonetheless also been awful. And I know that the leaders that can bring us out of this moment are out there. But what I worry about is how many other people like Maxwell Frost are out there who have that same grit, who have that same will, who have that same determination, that have that backbone, that just don't have the financial support that they need to get elected to help bring this generation the hope that they need to believe, like, actually, I know the political system is corrupt, but it's not so corrupt that there isn't at least one person who is able to represent me, who, when they got elected to Congress like Maxwell, knows the feeling what it's like to be denied an apartment, even as a freshman member of Congress.
I remember that.
Running for office. That is the experience that we need more of in Congress. And having those young people there, I believe is an essential part of us addressing gun violence and so many of the other issues that we have, because this generation has paid the price in so many different ways for the corruption that we all see, that I think is part of the reason why Donald Trump gained so much power in the first place, because people are sick and tired of that corrupt system. And they're looking for anybody that feels like they can provide an answer. And what Democrats need to do is show how we're the party that actually makes government work, and we're the party that stands up against corruption.
Yeah. And David, just finally, I mean, one of the things that I think one of the reasons why Donald Trump is where he is right now, why the Republicans are dominating the scene here in Washington, and to the point where they've shut down the government, and there's no end in sight to that, is, you know, we have, I think, a situation in America right now where the far right, the right, has very successfully cultivated this youth base. And we saw this with Charlie Kirk, obviously, and so on. And, you know, people are constantly saying, why don't we have a Joe Rogan of the left and that sort of thing? And why don't we have a Charlie Kirk of the left? And there are some of those folks. I think that there is some of that. But do you agree that it's not really a level playing field right now, and that progressives better get on this And that was the thing that pissed me off about what happened to you, David, just to be very honest, is that I'm like, okay, is David perfect? No, my God, he's a young guy. But why are you running off somebody like David? I mean, that was my reaction to the whole thing. And not to take your side in this, but that's how I felt. And I'm looking at what's happening on the right now. They have all of these young characters who are somewhat charismatic and have built this youth base, and progressives better get on that. It seems to me.
I mean, we have to. The bottom line is, when it came down to the DNC stuff, I had a decision to make between staying at the DNC in a largely symbolic and volunteer role as one of 5 vice chairs, or sticking to my values and doing what I think we actually need to do to start to win back young people, which is getting some fresh blood in this party and some new ideas in this party, and hammering out those differences and disagreements that we have in our primaries, and then consolidating around the Democratic nominee. And I think what's important to note about young people is Trump's support has gone down pretty substantially with young people.
That's right.
And I think what we're seeing right now is the reality of, I think the best way to describe how young people are feeling, from my sense of talking to them and being young myself, is, imagine if you were 10 feet underwater and you have one person who's arguing, the other side wants to put you 11 feet underwater, right? And I will bring you 9 feet underwater. You don't really care if you're 9 feet or 10 feet underwater. You don't want to be underwater at all. And what you're going to be doing is reaching out for any hand that you feel like might be able to pull you to the surface, so that you're there and not underwater at all. And I think that's kind of where young people are, where we have done everything that we've been told, just statistically speaking, for most of our lives. We have some of the highest rates of college education. We have some of the lowest rates of teen pregnancy, some of the lowest rates of alcoholism, and some of the highest rates of political participation of any generation in American history. And yet we still find ourselves in a position where, are we paid more than our parents? Yeah, we are. That's great. But everything else, the necessities of life, rent, food, insurance, everything that you basically have no option to pay for, is exponentially more expensive than it was for our parents. And that generation is going to be looking for anybody to try to provide them an answer as quickly as possible. And I think that it is on Democrats to show those young people, through candidates like Zoran and others, that we actually are fighting against special interests that have brought our country and our generation to this point, be it the NRA, be it, so many of the groups that have enabled the student debt crisis and other things like that. But it's not as simple as saying, and I think this is one of my biggest critiques of us as a party, is we have to get more specific. We have to stop saying, oh, we just need to fight against corruption. How? What groups are we talking about? Name names here, right? If you're going to talk about lowering costs, how? Everybody can agree it would be great if we had lower costs. What are you doing to actually make life easier and more affordable for the American people? And I think Zoran did a great job of doing that, but there's way more Democrats that need to learn from that, and not just say vague as hell talking points where nobody really knows what that means, but at least it doesn't piss anybody off.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think that's very true. And David, I always tell you, I admire your passion and your ability to hang in there and continue this fight. And I know where it came from. And, my hat's off to you, man, for what you've done, what you've been able to do with, how old are you? 26? Is that how did I
25.
20. Oh my God.
Yep.
And you hang in there, man. Keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you. And if anybody wants to support us, our candidates, they don't take corporate money. We don't take corporate money either. And we're supported by 200,000 individuals around the country. Would love to have that be 250,000 by the end of this year. If anybody wants to support us, just go to leaderswedeserve.com. And the best way you can help, besides just voting and running for office and telling us other great young people to support who are running for office, is consider just giving us $5 a month, so that we can have continuous support long before an election day to go out there and recruit young people.
All right. Good deal. All right. Thanks, David. I really appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thanks, Jim.